Well, this is my boldest review so far. I am reviewing C.S. Lewis's book on literary criticism. So I am criticizing C.S. Lewis's book on criticism. And if that might seem a little too niche for you, you are not interested at all in being a literary critic, well, too bad. You already are one. We are all critics of whatever we read, whatever we watch. We can't help but judge whatever we consume, even the most superficial of judgments. Do I like it? Do you hate it? Is it true? Is the author a jerk? Those are all basic forms of literary criticism. C.S. Lewis's experiment in criticism is really about being a better reader and not about being a better critic. Lewis clearly had a certain disdain for the professional literary critic of his day. They were too easily swayed by what was considered popular at the moment. You could say our critics today have the same struggle and problem as well. They're more focused on their judgment of the writing or the book or the film than what the book can communicate to them. So his experiment on criticism was really looking not at the criticism of books, but it was the criticism of those who read them. What do our responses to books communicate about us as readers? And how can you, in turn, be a better reader? Welcome to Rev Reads, your home for book reviews from the perspective of a pastor. If you're new to this channel and want to discover more books that will help you to read wider and to read deeper, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date on my most current reviews. And if you're a regular to this channel already, please like this video, share it with other people to help them know about a very underappreciated work by C.S. Lewis. So Lewis begins this book with a discussion on exercise and games. He writes about how there are men and women who play games for the joy of the sport, the thrill of the competition. You bike because you enjoy mountain biking. You play pickleball because you love the thrill of competition. There are others, though, who are involved with sports for the purpose of staying in shape. So you run, not because you love running, but because it's good for your blood pressure. You play basketball in order to get your lazy behind off the couch. Lewis says those who play games for the purpose of gaining physical improvement, they aren't even really playing games. They're simply exercising, and they have lost the joy of why those sports exist in the first place. And Lewis complains in this book that many reviewers and readers are like the guy who runs up and down the basketball court in order to stay in shape. They read because they must, or they read because they should. And that doesn't make for a good reader. While great readers read not for the purpose of criticizing the writing, or because they know they should read a certain work, but the ideal way to read is to read for the love of reading. So then that brings the million-dollar question. How do I know if I'm reading for the love of reading? And if I'm not, how do I develop a love for reading? Well, the first key to develop a love for reading is don't worry about making judgments on what you read, at least at first. Don't be focused on how accurate this is or how well written that may be. Instead, come into reading, start reading books with a very simple goal. And that is, I want to receive the author's point of view. I want to learn from their perspective. I want to see what they see and view the world from their eyes because I can't do that without them. The great joy of reading is found when reading expands our perspective of the world. And if we're honest, we all live with a very, very narrow view. We all can only see so much of this world in which we live. We only have time to learn such a few number of things. Like, personally, I've never traveled to outer space. I've never lived in the 16th century, or studied Latin, or earned a PhD. But you know what I can do? I can read a book by Orson Scott Card about what it might be like if we began to travel freely in our solar system and beyond. I can read a biography of characters in church history and step into the 16th century by reading about their lives. I can read books by men with PhDs in languages that I have never read, and I can gain from all of these various perspectives in the world. Reading becomes a joy when reading opens up worlds we could have never experienced without books. This is why we need to do 3 things in particular, according to Lewis, when reading. The first thing you need to do is ignore the popular criticisms of the day when it comes to how others have experienced books. The popular views of a book that are held equally by hundreds or thousands of people are probably going to fit into the category of just being the common view today regarding that book. And you don't want the common view regarding a certain book. You want the author's specific viewpoint of what they're writing. So don't allow others' criticisms or even their praises to taint your experience of how you engage with a book. The second thing you need to do is read widely. Lewis writes on how, in his opinion, the highest form of literature is the fairy tale. Yet he complains that because of modern tastes in his age, they are disregarded and overlooked. And you can see from his writings and those of Tolkien how highly they regarded the fairy tale. But we need to read all different types of literature. We need to read fictions. We need to read fairy tales, dramas, biographies, works of theology, new books, old books. Because the wider you read, the wider and more glorious and wonderful your perspective becomes. This should also encourage us to do a second thing, and that is read books from authors we know we won't agree with. I am a dispensationalist, so I just finished a book that opposes and criticizes dispensationalism. And now I'm going to follow that with a book that supports it. I do this in order to broaden my view, to broaden my understanding of my theology, interpretation of the Bible, and how I can be better at my own study of the Word by reading multiple other points of view. You see, if you only ever read from people that you agree with, you're not only stunting your personal growth, but from Lewis's perspective, you're also limiting your enjoyment of reading. The third thing you need to do is read books multiple times. And this is the one that I struggle with the most. You need to engage with an author and his writings 2 or 3, or maybe even 5 or 6 times in order to see his perspective with greater clarity. You see, our world doesn't need more book critics. What our world needs is better readers. Lewis had this interesting line in the book. What damns a book is not the existence of bad readings, but the absence of good ones. You see, the world will always be filled with men and women who condemn books for no other reason than that's not popular right now, or that genre has been overplayed, or I won't read science fiction, or I don't do poetry because I believe it's dead. I'm one of those don't do poetry people, and that's a given. Where a book's failure or success rests, though, is in men and women who are willing to read a book while saying to the author, please, broaden my horizons, expand my creativity, increase my knowledge. If you have nothing good to say about a book, if you can't glean anything from it, well, of course, I'm sure there are exceptions to this rule, as there is to every rule. But for the most part, if you can't say anything good about a book, it actually says more about your reading than an author's writing. We must risk being taken in if we are to get anything. If you are unwilling to allow an author to sway you with his view, if you aren't open to the possibility that they have something to share with you of value, you probably won't gain whatever you could benefit from that book you are reading. Even if the majority of that book is something that you would say, that's not even fit to print. Usually there's something in that book that can broaden your horizon and increase your perspective. A true lover of literature is one who is entertained by all that he reads because he finds enjoyment in the journey of seeing the world from the eyes of the author. And the reason he has that joy is because the reader first understands how small is the vision that he possesses without good books. So I want to say An Experiment in Criticism, this is a book that isn't for everyone. Parts of this book are difficult reading. One of the things that's difficult about it is that Lewis is so widely read and talks about a lot of books from his own day that it's difficult to follow all of the different books that he references throughout in this one. But if you want to be a better reader, this should be a book that you take up. Thankfully, it's really short. It's not going to take long at all. I'm going to be making a few changes about what I read and how I read as a result of this book, and I believe reading it will make me a better reader in the end. So if you want C.S. Lewis's full advice on how to be a better reader, a better critic, since you are one, even if you don't want to claim the title, read his book, An Experiment in Criticism.